Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide Jason. Let's be honest here, we all love giant freaking monsters. Why else has King Kong and Godzilla lasted generations? And we even have some in mythology like Bulgasari, Jormungandr. Yeah, humans haven't changed much in the millennia. So what would it take to create a kaiju monster? Before we talk about the biology of the kaiju, we need to address the ecology of it. And we need to talk a fair bit about dinosaurs. They are amongst the closest things we have ever had to kaiju, though a major difference in size. The largest dinosaur is the Titanosaurs, a kind of sauropod or long-necked dinosaur. They are about 120 feet or 37 meters long and weighed around 70 tons. Another good example is the blue whales, which are 30 meters to 100 feet long and weighing up to 200 tons. But how big is a kaiju? Let's pick the most famous of them today, Godzilla. And if you followed many of the movies and shows, you already know that his size varies widely. A measly 50 meters or 160 feet on the short end, and clear up to 300 meters, 984 feet on the big end. And his weight is just as bad. 20,000 metric tons, up to 164,000 metric tons. So, for simplicity, I'm going to be sticking with the small end of Godzilla's. So, over 285 times more than the Titanosaurs, or 10 times the weight of the blue whales, at only 3 times its size. Now your weight will increase at a much faster rate than body size. It's the square root cube law. If length doubles, volume is 8 times greater. So potentially, the Godzilla's weight is wrong. But more on that later. Let's stick to the ecology. There are many theories which exist regarding the evolution of dinosaurs. And the first factor is time. It is believed that in order to evolve into a larger figure, it required time. And after massive disasters and calamities, which wiped out a huge chunk of the animal and plant species, say a giant meteor crashing down from space, the animals which are more likely to survive are the little ones. And I'll explain that in a bit. Now this theory is partially true. Yes, evolution will take time, but that isn't the only factor to address. There needs to be something which promotes evolving into such a size. Some sort of factor which leads an evolutionary advantage to being big. And this is what I have been building towards. How much do they eat? A blue whale is about 4 tons of food, or 12% of its body weight, depending on the estimates you use. And how much did a titanosaur eat? Well, several hundred pounds of food. A T-Rex was estimated to eat up to 770 pounds, 350 kilograms a day. Okay, there's a difference there. The whale is eating krill, a small crustacean. Second, it is a warm-blooded mammal, which means it will need to maintain a certain body temperature, and due to water being a heat sink, it does require a lot of work. Lastly, dinosaurs were believed to be more reptile-like, and could get away with less food. So, if we need to up the food intake by 8 times or more to match the increase in the body size. And where are we going to get that food? Well, for predators, that would mean animals. That doesn't mean eating daily for predators though. Lions, for example, are usually only successful 1 out of 3 hunting attempts. That means they will have several days where they're going hungry. That is why, when they do get a kill, they will gorge themselves and eat far more than they normally would. And for a kaiju, that won't work. They are too big. On the days they don't eat, they will be burning their fat reserves to survive, so it will need those. So, how do we get the food? How did the dinosaurs do it? Well, they were able to grow much larger plants to sustain the animals, and this was due to a few factors. First off, the percentage of carbon dioxide in the air was much higher, about 2.5 times higher than it was today. This provided plenty of material for photosynthesis. Now on the oxygen front, it is currently 20.95% of the atmosphere. But in the late Cretaceous, it was an insane 25 to 30%. And there's an issue for humans. We can only survive up to 23.5% of the atmosphere being oxygen. Past that, it becomes a nerve toxin and will kill you. Okay, this isn't completely accurate. Part of what makes this is the air pressure. When air pressure is low, it slows down the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange rates, and you can survive at a higher oxygen concentration then. And this might be useful. If we would increase the air pressure, you could get away with a lower oxygen concentrations. So there is a workaround, but that creates other issues. But it is an option. By increasing the carbon dioxide concentration, you get denser forests, and thus can support more animals. And it promotes more oxygen in the air. Now, having a higher percentage of oxygen can actually help with respiration. Like I mentioned with the air pressure trick, at a higher percentage, you can speed up the oxygen exchange. And this is actually another theory about the evolution of the dinosaurs, that the higher oxygen let them grow larger by reducing the strain and burden of respiration. But I mentioned something earlier that we need to go over. Do you remember when I mentioned the theory that it took a long time with few cataclysms to grow large? Well, that is the thing here. Even if the theory doesn't fully work for dinosaurs, it will be necessary here. We need an environment where we aren't constantly being assaulted with such disasters. No ice ages and no heat ages, limited supervolcanoes and so on. So, this is our formula, a consistent environment void of frequent disasters. A higher carbon dioxide percentage in the air to promote larger forests, which will provide the oxygen and food to sustain our kaiju. And that's the environment to sustain them. It's a fair bit to be sure. And now we can get to the kaiju themselves. And there's a few problems. Okay, we've got a lot of problems. And since I said we tackled the weight earlier, let's look at it. Kaiju are freaking heavy. Hundreds of tons, if not thousands. And they will need to be able to move, and that takes muscle. Do you see the problem yet? They are pretty big. Let's start with the bones. We need a sturdy skeleton to hold it up. But bones aren't without weight, and if we increase the size of the bones, their weight increases, which means needing thicker bones to take the weight. But that isn't the only facet of it. I just told you that it needs to move. And muscles have weight too, so the bones need to be thicker to take the weight. But then we need bigger muscles to move the bones, and around we go. This creates an evolutionary feedback loop. Thus, we are at a paradox of biology. So eventually, it will need to find a balance. If not, it might reach a breaking point in its growth, where its body would literally collapse in on itself. But we have issues with its body design. And this is why I do like the Tarrasque. This massive monster of mythology has a total of 6 legs, like a bear. Why is that important, you're probably thinking? Well, we have weight distribution issues. And if we only have 2 legs, like Godzilla, there's an issue. When it walks, all that weight needs to go through that one leg. There is a very high chance that the leg would snap. Yeah, just taking a single step could be an issue. So a better option would be to have 4 legs or even more. This could spread the weight enough that it shouldn't snap its legs. But there is an issue. I want you to think about elephants. What do their legs look like? Well, they are thick like a tree trunk. And we are going to need this for a kaiju. This is going to require reworking the hip joints, mostly bolstering up the ligaments and tendons. When it swings its leg forward, all that weight is going to be suspended from them. We will need all of these structures capable of taking that strain, and then the joint will need the cushioning to take the following impact. This is done with a few methods, including using joint capsules filled with synovial fluid, different types of cartilage, meniscus, and bursa. You don't need to know what all those do, just that they help absorb the impact. And they will take a lot of wear and tear, improving blood flow into these areas to help preserve them. And we got to address the spine. It needs to absorb the body's weight. Either compression of it if it's upright, or pulling forces if its body is suspended from it. So they will need similar support as the hip and knee joints. But the lungs and heart are an issue. It will need longer breaths to get the air from its mouth and nose down to its lungs. We are looking at dozens, if not hundreds of feet that the air will need to cover. That means each breath is going to be the equivalent of a windstorm. So, we will need to improve the strength of the respiratory muscles. Oh great, even more weight on the spine and legs. And there is going to be a higher rate of mixing new and old air with each breath. Unless we can modify the birds' unilateral airways, it is a much better system. But makes them susceptible to poison, except at our kaiju size, that won't be a problem. Another issue is going to be the heart. Its job is to pump blood. Yes, I know I'm telling you something you already know, but that is the issue. There is resistance to pumping blood. Inertia, mass, narrow arteries, and so on. And as we increase the size of the body, we will need to increase the size of the veins and arteries. At a certain point, this will end up being like pipes, which carry water in our towns and sewers. And pushing all of that is a monumental task. We are looking at the equivalent to moving a whole lake. So we really need to bulk up the heart. But the issue will come with the veins. Normally, these rely on passive blood flow and contractions from the muscles to push the blood around, while using valves to keep the blood from flowing back. And at these volumes and sizes, it's going to take more effort. Yet the problem comes with how long the blood will be circulating. This means that the length of time where the blood cells are needing to carry the oxygen and carbon dioxide increases, and blood cells need oxygen too. Yeah, this will put more strain on it. Yet there is a potential workaround. At these sizes, we could create a symbiotic relationship with some form of bacteria which could produce oxygen to support the whole organism. And this brings up the final issue. Parasites are going to be a major threat. Both internal and external parasites will likely be all over it. This will result in constant infections. Parasites and infections can result in sepsis or blood poisoning. And at this size, it'll put strain on things like the kidneys managing it all. But there is going to be an issue with it if you want to add some special powers of kaiju. Flight is a joke. Do you have any clue how big its wings are going to be to support such a creature? Well, miles wide, and then the strain of each wing beat will likely shatter the bones and tear the muscles. And if they try jumping, it will break bones. Which means most battles will be more posturing and roaring rather than clashing and charging. Yeah, there are a few issues which are facing the creation of kaiju-sized animals. We need the perfect environment to exist that can provide for its existence, and then getting its biology to function properly is another miracle. Honestly, just getting the Earth in the right condition for the dinosaurs was probably a miracle in itself. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.